LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the September 20th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mix-Up. Thanks for joining me. Today I'll be using the 11 best, most newsworthy clips from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for which would be a really informative media criticism and political commentary show for you all today. My main topic is actually a double topic. It's boosters and bipartisanship blocked, and those are the two topics that my 5 newsmaker clips will be split into. The decision by the agencies in the federal government deciding whether to approve boosters for the general population, supposedly it was going to be starting today, didn't happen over the last few days, and that was a big topic on the Sunday morning news analysis shows, and also the problems getting together on that bipartisan infrastructure deal combined with the $3.5 trillion Democrat-only reconciliation human infrastructure deal. I'll have clips of Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Bill Cassidy talking about that at the end. I'll have Francis Collins and Anthony Fauci talking about the COVID boosters, but I want to, and of course the clip of the week will be Jake Tapper's cross-examination of the governor of Mississippi, Tate Reeves, about Mississippi's abysmal performance during this whole COVID pandemic. So look forward to that clip. That is a great cross-examination, and that's actually the first of the newsmakers clips. I have all the clips summarized down in the video description, clips 1 through 11 there. So yeah, that'll be clip 5. That'll be clip 7 after the news summaries. But for the political comedy clip, there was, I guess the Trump administration is the gift that keeps on giving when it comes to outrageous scandals. And there was this Bob Woodward and Robert Costa's book, Peril, about the end of the Trump administration is coming out, and they released some excerpts. And one of the things I found really comical, I guess to really find it comical, you have to be kind of as old as I am and remember this guy who was vice president named Dan Quayle. Dan Quayle was, I guess a lot of vice presidents are the butt of jokes, but he was the butt of a lot of jokes. And there was this infamous incident where he misspelled the word potato at like a elementary school spelling bee. But probably one of the things he's most famous for is he was the recipient of one of the worst zingers in any of the debates I've ever watched, any of the televised debates. And I actually have, for those of you who aren't old enough to remember Vice President Dan Quayle in this October 1988 debate he had with Lloyd Bentsen. There's a link down in the video description to the source of all my clips, including the entire debate on C-SPAN. But this was the zinger that those of us who watched that debate will never forget over here.
I will be prepared not only because of my service in the Congress, but because of my ability to communicate and to lead. It is not just age, it's accomplishments, it's experience. I have far more experience than many others that sought the office of Vice President of this country. I have as much experience in the Congress as Jack Kennedy did when he sought the presidency. I will be prepared to deal with the people in the Bush administration if that unfortunate event would ever occur.
Senator Bentsen.
Senator, I served with Jack Kennedy. I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy. What has to be done in a situation like that? In a situation like that,
you're only taking time
is to call in the joint.
Your own candidate.
So yeah, that was, and you heard the tremendous response in the room, but yeah, that was just a zinger for the ages. And the reason I play that zinger for the ages is, like I was saying, the new book from Bob Woodward and Robert Costa is coming out. And I'm about to show you an article about it from CNN. And when I saw this article, I was thinking, Dan Quayle was such like a butt of jokes and thought of as like a lightweight. What would my 1988 self have thought if I went back and said, went back in time and told myself 32 years ago, well, he's a lightweight now, but 32 years from now, Dan Quayle is going to save American democracy. Well, that was like the title of this CNN piece, How Dan Quayle Saved Democracy. Yes, really. This is sort of my political comedy to put with that clip, and I put a link down to this entire article, but there's an excerpt of the Bob Woodward, Robert Costa book Peril here, where you can see over and over Pence asked if there was anything he could do. This is on January 6th, about whether he had to certify the election or if he could do what Donald Trump wanted and say that the election shouldn't be certified. Mike, you have no flexibility on this. None, zero, forget it, put it away, Quayle told him. Pence pressed again. You don't know the position I'm in, he said, according to the authors. I do know the position you're in, Quayle responded. I also know what the law is. You listen to the parliamentarian. That's all you do. You have no power. So, there you go. If Bob Woodward and Robert Costa is to be believed, it actually may be true that that lightweight who was no John F. Kennedy actually is responsible for saving American democracy back in January 2020. So even though that's not on my topic, that was in the news this week, and there were people talking about it in the panel discussions on the Sunday shows. But I just wanted to start the show with that, and now I guess I will get to the news summaries from the longest to the shortest. Actually, this week, NBC News' Meet the Press has the shortest of the news summaries. Is that right? Yeah, shortest of the news summaries. So I'm going to start with the longest one, and I think this is kind of in competition with the CBS News Face the Nation news summary as to which one does the best explanation of what's going on in terms of the ongoing COVID pandemic and the, I'd say, delay, not rejection of vaccine boosters for the general public. And in between the ABC and CBS ones, I'll show you the Fox News one, which I think is much more biased, for reasons I'll discuss with you after we go through watching them together, starting with ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, with co-host Martha Raddatz as anchor yesterday over in this clip.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. A few days before the official start of fall, what was billed as the summer of freedom has come and gone. On the National Mall, more than 600,000 flags, one for each life lost to COVID. The sea of white representing an unfathomable and devastating toll. Just 3 months ago, the U.S. daily case average was nearing a record low, about 11,000 new cases. Now we're averaging about 143,000 cases per day, reporting roughly 1 million cases over the last week. And while President Biden hoped an FDA advisory panel would recommend boosters for all vaccinated Americans, on Friday, the panel voted to recommend boosters only for those 65 and older or at high risk of severe disease. Dr. Anthony Fauci is standing by. He joins us in just a moment. But we begin with the latest on that FDA recommendation and what it all means for some of the most vulnerable as the school year gets underway. It was just last month that President Biden laid out his plan for booster shots.
This booster program is going to start here on September the 20th, pending approval of the FDA and the CDC committee of outside experts.
That approval did not come for everyone. And while the panel did not officially vote on it, they do support including vulnerable populations like teachers, healthcare, and other frontline workers in this first round. But when it comes to ending the pandemic, the message remains clear.
made to vaccinate the unvaccinated.
While 76% of adults have received at least one dose, the millions of unvaccinated Americans are fueling hospitalizations and directly impacting some of the most vulnerable. Children.
The best way to protect our children is to vaccinate our community.
ICU beds here at Children's National Hospital, a precious commodity. I have to say, just coming in and standing by that emergency room, I was stunned. It is packed down here, and it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, our emergency departments certainly have been flooded. And we've been doing a lot of planning and trying to be as agile as possible to be able to meet those volumes.
Those higher volumes of pediatric cases coinciding with the start of the school year. More than 1 million children nationwide have tested positive in the last month. PTA President Cynthia Simonson lives in Montgomery County, Maryland, where the vaccination rate is higher. But she knows that's not the case for so many districts across the country. When you look at the places that just flat out won't get it, what would you say to them?
It grieves me, but, you know, we can't force it, right? But what we can do is we can educate those families as best we can.
In nearby Fairfax County, more than 80% of 12 to 17-year-olds in school are vaccinated. Tell me what experience you've had here.
We are going through a pandemic while also recovering from a pandemic. And that is bringing a lot of emotion, a lot of ups and downs to trying to do everything we can to meet the needs of our students.
With an already high vaccination rate, the superintendent tells me he'd welcome boosters for his staff. As you look at the possibility of the boosters, pretty sure the community would do that.
We have a mandatory vaccination for staff now, and I think many of our staff will avail themselves for the opportunity to get the booster shot, and we'll be supporting that.
A lot to discuss this morning, so let's bring in the president's chief medical advisor, Dr. Anthony Fauci.
And I will have a clip of Martha Raddatz's interview with Dr. Anthony Fauci. That is clip number 9, if you're following along in the clip summaries down in the video description. And I thought that was a generally good news summary. It talked about the change in the science that caused the delay in approval of vaccine boosters, and it looked at what was going on around the country. I think actually the CBS News Face the Nation news summary does a better look at the divisions, the political divisions around the country. But the worst of the news summaries is this next one, Fox News Sunday. And I mean, there are some important facts that they give in this Fox News Sunday news summary, but there are a couple little buzzwords that I'll talk about after we watch it that I think that Fox News has done has tried as hard as possible to spin the decision not to approve boosters for the general population as some kind of failure for the Biden administration, because Biden gave this speech back in I think was it in July or August? I think in August, saying that today, September 20th, was going to be the day that they were going to roll out boosters for everyone. But of course, when he gave that speech, he put caveats on it that it was based on the approval of the administrative agencies when they got the data. That's mentioned in this news summary, but I think there's still the spin, and I'll talk about it with you a little more. Having pre-criticized the clip enough, I think I'll talk about the rest of it a little more with you after we watch that Fox News Sunday news summary from Chris Wallace and reporter Mark Meredith in Delaware over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. We begin with breaking news. If you're wondering what happened at that rally yesterday supporting people arrested in the January 6th Capitol riot, police mobilized for the possibility of another disturbance. But a small crowd of only a few hundred people showed up, and they protested peacefully. No violence, just 4 arrests. Meanwhile, President Biden suffered a setback in his fight against COVID. An FDA advisory panel rejected his plan to offer booster shots to all adults, saying only seniors and those most at risk should get them. And we have new Fox polls on the issue. When it comes to teachers, 61% favor mandatory vaccinations, 58% favor a mandate for all government workers, and 56% agree with President Biden for businesses with more than 100 workers to mandate vaccines. Overall, 55% now approve of President Biden's handling of the pandemic, 11 points more than those who disapprove. But in June, his approval margin was 30 points. We'll have more Fox polls throughout the hour. And we'll discuss the controversy over vaccine boosters with Dr. Francis Collins, director of the National Institutes of Health. But first, let's get the latest from Mark Meredith, traveling with the president in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. Mark.
Chris, for months, the Biden administration has been making plans to distribute millions of COVID booster shots. The rollout was even set to begin this week. But now those plans, they are in limbo, as after a key group of scientists determined most Americans don't need the shot. With a 16-2 vote, an FDA advisory committee decided against recommending most Americans get a third dose of Pfizer's coronavirus vaccine.
And I just don't think we're there yet in terms of the data. More needs to be known about the correlates of protection.
In August, President Biden strongly endorsed booster shots while also warning the data was still under review.
It will make you safer and for longer, and it will help us end the pandemic faster.
While the advisory panel is rejecting boosters for most people, their recommendation is non-binding, meaning the CDC and FDA will make a final call later this week.
We have always said that this initial plan would be contingent on the FDA and the CDC's independent evaluation. We will follow that evaluation and their recommendations.
Advisors are recommending Americans 65 and older and those at high risk for disease be eligible for a third shot. The Biden administration says, quote, "We stand ready to provide booster shots to eligible Americans once the process concludes." This week, the president's going to be making his way up to New York to address the UN General Assembly for the first time since taking office. He's also going to be convening a virtual COVID summit, calling on world leaders to unite behind a common vision for ending the pandemic. Chris.
Mark Meredith reporting from Delaware. Mark, thank you. And joining us now, the director of the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Francis Collins.
And I will have a large excerpt of Chris Wallace's interview of Dr. Francis Collins, which is really more of a cross-examination building on those Fox News talking points that this decision not to approve vaccine boosters for the general population is some big rejection for the Biden administration, when it was really more of a delay if you pay attention to the facts. I guess I have to give credit to Fox News there for showing a poll that actually gave positive numbers to vaccine and mask mandates and even Biden's handling of the pandemic, although it has been falling, which they pointed out. I thought Mark Meredith's report again overemphasized this rejection. You know, he said they determined that most Americans don't need the shot when it's really they've determined the data doesn't support vaccine boosters yet. Which may change, and you'll see that when I show the clips from Francis Collins and Anthony Fauci coming up. I also, at least they did mention that when Biden made that speech calling for the rollout of vaccine boosters today, they mentioned in the narrative that he put in caveats that it requires approval by these agencies based on data that we don't have yet. But of course, when Fox News played the clip of Biden, they didn't show that part. They only showed the part where he said that we're going to have vaccine boosters today, which was rejected according to Fox News. But anyway, like I said before I showed the last two clips, I think this Face the Nation news summary may be the best one, especially in terms of showing the political divisions. Mark Strassmann, who usually reports from Atlanta, is in Orlando this week. I don't know exactly why that is. Florida has had some really bad policy decisions from Governor Ron DeSantis. Some people call him Governor Death Sentence. Ron Death Sentence. I've heard that. But just because COVID has really gotten out of control in a lot of southern states. Like I said, I'm going to show you Jake Tapper do an incredible cross-examination of the governor of Mississippi. in a couple after I show the next 3 news summaries, starting with this Face the Nation news summary. Mark Strassmann in Orlando, after a brief introduction from Margaret Brennan, that I think this might be the best in the news summaries. Well, Jake Tapper does his own thing that's a lot shorter that I'll praise in a different way, but let's first watch Face the Nation together, summarize the news yesterday over here.
And welcome to Face the Nation. On the COVID front, the news is still bleak. Nearly 10,000 Americans died last week of the virus. We now total more than 673,000 dead. Children who are still not eligible for vaccines account for almost 29% of all cases. And according to the AAP, there were nearly 250,000 new pediatric COVID infections last week. We begin with senior national correspondent Mark Strassmann in Orlando.
Instead of widespread boosters, the Biden White House got a shot of rejection. An FDA advisory panel on Friday recommended Pfizer boosters only for vaccinated seniors and high-risk patients, a decision making a challenging process even more so.
If you want to roll out booster shots to the population, you can't flip a switch and make that happen overnight.
Not in COVID America, where the virus now kills around 1,900 people a day, the highest average in 6 months. By any measure, COVID sorrow stalks Florida with a vengeance. More than 50,000 Floridians already dead. An average of 350 more every day tops in America.
We got to manage our behaviors. We got to get vaccinated.
Dr. Vincent Hsu, an infectious disease physician, works at Advent Health Orlando. System-wide, Advent Health has 50 hospitals with 1,700 COVID patients, more than half of them in Central Florida.
There's still a lot of issues with taking care of these patients, supplies, space, as well as staffing.
Continuous surges remain a threat?
We always have to be prepared for another surge.
Critics blast the state's leadership for failing to protect the youngest Floridians.
The decision to try to keep kids in school was the right decision. The decision to let the virus spread the way it has and not even employ mitigation in the school as it's doing now, I disagree with that decision.
Pandemic politics surge blood pressures across the country. No more masks! In Ohio, state lawmakers threatened to block any mask mandate the governor tried to issue. And like his reaction,
every single county is red hot. Some counties are almost boiling over.
At the United Nations, the global worry, a potential super spreader event starting Tuesday. New York City has a vaccine mandate for conventions, but the UN has no power to enforce it.
We as Secretariat cannot tell a head of state if he's not vaccinated that he cannot enter the United Nations.
This hospital, Orlando's largest, is short hundreds of nurses, despite retention bonuses and shift bonuses. And it's a crisis across America's hospitals. Early retirements, resignations, and a rash of sick days. Staff burned out by this ongoing COVID siege. Margaret?
Mark, thank you. We'd like to now welcome the director of the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Francis Collins, to the broadcast.
And I'll have a Francis Collins clip, but from Fox News coming up in a few minutes. Francis Collins is Anthony Fauci's boss, and I also have an Anthony Fauci clip. That last thing that Mark Strassmann was talking about, you know, my wife is a healthcare worker, and that's one of the things that I've heard is in this this latest wave of COVID, especially since it's a pandemic of the unvaccinated, that and the pandemic's been going on for like 18 months. People are just burnt out. People just can't take it anymore. They're, like Mark Strassmann was saying, there are people quitting, people calling in sick. And, you know, the thing is, in the medical world, there are a lot of conditions that people get that if you wanted to say, oh, we don't treat people for things that are their own damn fault, there'd be a lot of things people wouldn't get treated for. You know, you might smoke or drink or overeat or, you know, drive unsafely or, you know, ski unsafe. Who knows what you did that made you partially responsible for the medical care you need. But that doesn't mean that doctors and nurses don't care for you just because what happened to you is kind of your own damn fault. But I don't think it's just that aspect of it. I think it's also that they've been kind of living in the medical equivalent of a war zone for like 18 months, and they thought it was over. They thought, light at the end of the tunnel, and now it's all happening over again, and it's disturbing. And so I give kudos to CBS News Face the Nation's news summary for pointing that part out. I also thought it was the best coverage of the political divisiveness. I don't know, I think it was better than the ABC one that was longer. Certainly both of them were better than the Fox News Sunday news summary in between. You can let me know what you think about that down in the comment section. I've been reading the live comments along the way. I saw Matthew gave me a nice super chat contribution. I really appreciate that. I appreciate just the moral support I get from viewers showing up for the live show or leaving comments on the recorded show, giving me a thumbs up, subscribing to the channel, and also the financial support, super chat contributions, and then for direct PayPal contributions that I have a link down in the video description for, or monthly patrons on Patreon. At the $5 level, I send out these hashtag LiberalViewer weatherproof vinyl stickers. And then at the $10 level, I send that out along with this ACLU Constitution with a Know Your Rights section in the back. And honestly, I just send them both out at the $5 and $10 level because at this point, I have so many of them and I paid for them a long time ago. So just to distribute the Constitution is a good in and of itself. But anyway, that it's just my moment thanking people for financial and other types of support for the channel. And now I'm going to move on to the next news summary, which, I said CNN State of the Union did their own kind of thing here because Jake Tapper, he does talk about the vaccine boosters not being approved, but you'll see that he throws in a whole bunch of other problems that the Biden administration has been facing. This is maybe what you would expect from Fox News because it's showing, Biden administration in trouble, but included in CNN State of the Union news summary that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch together over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper, where the State of our Union is trying to figure out if we're going to need to get boosters or not, as President Biden tries to refocus on his legislative agenda, pushing toward a massive $3.5 trillion spending bill that could define his presidency. The Biden administration is coming off yet another difficult week. Tomorrow, September 20th, marks the week the Biden administration had planned to begin giving COVID booster shots to the general public. Instead, an advisory panel to the FDA voted no on Friday, no on recommending booster shots to everyone after 6 months, recommending instead boosters only for those 65 and older and those at high risk of severe disease. And they're only furthering confusion for so many Americans as the pandemic hits another horrifying milestone this week. 1 in 500 Americans have died from the virus, more than 673,000 people represented here on the National Mall with flags for each death. This debate over boosters comes as the Biden administration is on its heels with a number of crises of its own doing, facing a devastating acknowledgement from the Pentagon Friday that a drone strike in Afghanistan killed 10 civilians, including 7 children, a surge of migrants at the southern border, leaving thousands of people, mostly from Haiti, huddled under a bridge as they wait to be processed, and a diplomatic breakdown with American ally France after a new national security partnership with the UK and Australia. But we begin today with the pandemic and this booster debate. Medical advisor Dr. Anthony Fauci. Dr. Fauci, you've been a...
And like I said, I will have an Anthony Fauci clip coming up, although not from Jake Tapper. The clip after next is Jake Tapper's epic cross-examination of Governor Tate Reeves of Mississippi. That do not miss that. That is coming up right after the NBC News Meet the Press news summary. The one thing I pretty much pre-criticized or pre-praised, I guess, the Jake Tapper news summary there for listing all those Biden administration problems at the end. The one other thing that I thought was useful that, you don't hear the numbers so much anymore, and Jake Tapper right at the top there emphasized the 1 in 500 Americans dead, over 673,000. You know, it was like close. I haven't really thought about it much. I knew it was over 600,000, but it's getting close to 700,000, and that's just people in the United States. I think it's more like 4 million dead worldwide. So this is it. You know, you kind of lose track and you lose perspective on the huge impact. I mean, that's a lot. That's, you know, I was talking about it compared to September 11th, the 20th anniversary of September 11th, a couple weeks ago, where the death of 3,000 Americans changed American foreign policy for 20 years or whatever. And every couple days, that's how many people are dying right now. And it's just a perspective that's important. And I don't know whether Chuck Todd's perspective here at the beginning of Meet the Press is important. There was no pre-recorded package at the beginning of the program. There was actually a pre-recorded package later about the Trump takeover of the Republican Party before the Senator Bill Cassidy clip that I'm going to show later. Although I'm not going to show you the pre-recorded package, but I guess because Chuck Todd's package was missing this week, that's why his news summary is so short, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that final news summary together over here.
Sunday morning. Could our fight against the coronavirus turn into our latest forever war? The war we thought we were winning at the beginning of the summer has been complicated by a more resilient enemy named Delta and by the reluctance of millions to get vaccinated. But there also have been confusing messages from the administration regarding third shots or booster shots. A month ago, President Biden, eager to further protect the already vaccinated, announced a plan to make Pfizer and Moderna booster shots available to most adults, starting as early as this week. But on Friday, an FDA advisory panel concerned primarily with slowing the pandemic voted against providing boosters to Americans aged 16 and up. Minutes later, though, the panel did vote for Pfizer boosters only, and only for those over 65 or at high risk for a severe COVID infection. All this comes amid the sobering news that the 7-day average of deaths topped 2,000. Though the number of cases has slowed somewhat in recent weeks, a hopeful sign that maybe the death rate will soon fall as well. Still, the mixed messaging threatens the administration's credibility on what is arguably the most pressing issue facing this president. President Biden won't be able to get his agenda passed without getting past COVID. In short, it's a war he can't afford to lose, and one that can't last forever. Joining me now is Dr. Anthony Fauci. He's, of course, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Dr. Fauci.
I don't know about that war analogy, that COVID is our new forever war. That, I don't know. That seems a little glib to me, and bringing it around at the end there, I mean, it's not really a war. It's a health crisis. It's a pandemic. I don't know if that analogy is helpful at all. And in some ways, I thought that Chuck Todd emphasized some of those same points from Fox News in terms of some failure by the Biden administration. You even saw the tweets from NBC News or headlines from NBC News. The FDA panel, rejects the Biden's booster plan, but it's really more of a delay, like I said earlier. And anyway, that is the last of the news summaries, and I've been really looking forward to this next clip to share with you and talk about it after we watch it together. Like I said, this is Jake Tapper cross-examining the governor of Mississippi, Tate Reeves. This isn't the entire interview. There was some stuff before this that I cut out, even though he asked him some great questions about the governor's opposing Biden's vaccine mandates, calling them tyrannical, even though the OSHA law seems to support it. And Jake Tapper even quoted the OSHA law that I should have quoted last week when I was talking about that. But this clip is already a little over 7 minutes long, so I had to cut that part out. And I'm just going to show you where he's cross-examining Tate Reeves on Mississippi's being the state with the highest per capita number of deaths, and apparently if Mississippi were a country, it would be second in per capita deaths in the world, just behind Peru. I didn't know Peru was so was doing so badly. The one thing that made me remember wasn't the Lambda variant from Peru? That worries me a little bit, because I didn't realize Peru was so bad off. But that's not really a pre-criticism of this clip. I do have one criticism of Jake Tapper's cross-examination that I will get to after we watch. He did a great job, and it's pretty damn entertaining, I think, as you can let me know what you think as we watch. I don't know, I think I proposed like a word for this, like in one of Jake Tapper's previous great cross-examinations, like Governor Tate Reeves of Mississippi has been Tapperized. What do you think? Has he been Tapperized? You can tell me what you think after we watch the clip together over here.
Let's talk about what you and the legislature in Mississippi is doing, because I'm sure I don't need to tell you, Mississippi this week became the state with the worst number of coronavirus deaths per capita. In fact, if Mississippi were its own country, you would be second in the world only to Peru in terms of deaths per capita. That's a horrible, horrible, heartbreaking statistic. So with all due respect, Governor, your way is failing. Are you going to try to change anything to change this horrible statistic from what you're doing already?
Yeah, well, obviously, in Mississippi, our legislature is a part-time legislature. Sometimes I wonder if in America, if our Congress was part-time, we wouldn't be in a better position. But let's talk a little bit about
better position than
Mississippi
what?
and where we are with the
virus. Your state is second worst in the world. I mean, how can you say that?
Let's talk about where we are and why. Well, Jake, let's talk about where we are and why we are there. In large part, just like the summer of 2020, it was the Sun Belt states that saw the initial surge from the Delta variant. It started, the first state that I saw seeing upticks was Missouri, and then it was Arkansas, and then it was Louisiana, and now it's Mississippi. Our surge went from less than 100 cases per day in Mississippi to 3,600, much like what happened in the country of Israel, like what happened in the country of Great Britain and in England. We saw a very quick spike, and now we're seeing a very quick decline in the total number of cases. We spiked at about 3,600. We're now half of that in our state. As you know, right. Unfortunately, fatalities is a lagging indicator when it comes to the virus. It is a lagging indicator. And so timing has as much to do with that statistic that you used as anything else. As we see in 2021, what occurred in 2020 as the Delta variant moves around the country, and it's going to happen. The president wants you to believe that the Delta variant is only affecting Republicans in red states.
Change anything?
That's just not true. That is not a fact. That is just not true. And so what you're going to see.
So, Governor, my point is this: you compared yourself to Israel.
The Delta variant is going to continue to move around the country, and you're going to see fatalities rise in other states. And so here's what we need to focus on, Jake. Okay, let's focus on this.
But my question is, what are you going to do to change this?
The best thing for Americans to do to protect themselves from the virus, and again, we believe in personal responsibility. Individual Americans and individual Mississippians
so you're not going to change anything.
Make good decisions to take care of themselves. The best thing that Americans can do, number one, is to talk to their doctor about potentially getting the vaccine, because in our state, some 89% of those hospitalized and some 87% of those who are of the deaths are actually coming from those who are unvaccinated. So the number one thing that you can do is you can talk to your doctor about getting vaccinated. The number two thing is, if you get the virus, and this is very important, if you get the virus, please talk to your doctor about the monoclonal antibody treatment.
You're not going to change anything.
That is the best way in which to do that. And unfortunately, the Biden administration continues to try to reduce the allocation to red states like Mississippi and Florida of that monoclonal antibody treatment.
Okay, Governor,
it's outrageous.
Governor, if Mississippi were a country, you would have the second worst per capita death toll in the world. And I'm saying, are you going to do anything to try to change that?
Jake, as I mentioned earlier, deaths, unfortunately, are a lagging indicator. Our total number of cases went from 100 to 3,600, and over the last 2 weeks has declined. They've been cut in half from 3,600 to 1,800. When you wanted me to come on 3 or 4 weeks ago, you want to talk about our number of cases. And then you want to talk about our hospitalizations. Now you want to talk about a lagging indicator, which is sad and it's
I'm trying
horrible.
to talk about
And
dead Mississippians is what I'm trying to talk about.
All 9,000 Mississippians that have passed away. But let's put this in perspective, Jake. I mean, the reality is Mississippi accounts for 1% of the U.S. population. We account for 1.1% of the total number of cases in America, and we account for 1.29% of the total number of fatalities in America. And so the reality is the Delta variant is very transmissible, and it is moving around the country. If you want to talk about cases right now, talk about Kentucky or West Virginia or what's happening in North Carolina or moving into Southern Virginia.
I'm asking you about your state, but I'm not going to ask you about West Virginia or Kentucky. I'm going to ask you about your state, and I'm just saying you seem to be very, very activated when it comes to fighting the mandate from the federal government. And I understand the arguments you're making, but what President Biden is trying to do is save lives. Now, you can think it's bad policy or it's unconstitutional, and that's fine. We can have that discussion. We already have. But he's trying to save lives. I'm saying to you, your way's not working. And whether you say it's a lagging indicator or whatever your argument is, Mississippi now has, if it were its own country, the second worst per capita death rate in the world, behind only Peru. And I'm saying, are you going to try to do anything to change that? And I'm not hearing an answer.
Well, what I have said to you repeatedly, Jake, is that Mississippi has taken action. Mississippi has seen a significant uptick in the total number of Mississippians that have gotten the vaccine. We've seen our case numbers have fallen dramatically in the last 2 weeks. And so ultimately, as I have said, deaths, unfortunately, is a lagging indicator. We've seen cases, again, cut in half in Mississippi. In these other states that you refuse to talk about, perhaps because they have Democrat governors, you don't want to talk about them. But the reality is that you and the president and so many other people want to make this about politics.
The governor of West Virginia is a Republican.
This virus is not just attacking Republicans in red states. This virus is not just attacking Republicans in red states. This virus is attacking Republicans and Democrats in red states and in blue states. And what we ought to be talking about is what can we do to minimize the deaths going forward? The president's not focused on saving lives. The president is focused on taking unilateral action to show his power, to show that he's doing something. But that's not going to solve things.
Okay. The governor of West Virginia is a Republican, but Governor Tate Reeves, I'm obviously not going to have a governor come on to talk about other states. I'm going to talk about your state, but we hope that the case rate continues to go down and that the death rate follows and also goes down. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on, Jake.
So yeah, I think that you see what I'm talking about in terms of Jake Tapper doing an awesome job at cross-examination. I was also reading the live comments along the way, and first I wanted to thank Tom Trask for that super chat contribution, another super chat contribution that always buoys my spirits when I'm doing the live stream, makes me feel appreciated. And I also noticed that there was a live comment from Christopher L. Perez Cruz that kind of leads to the commentary I wanted to make. Let me see if I can import that. Here we go. Yeah, the Reeves is throwing a challenge. The virus is going to go north. That's the one part of Tate Reeves' argument that I think Jake Tapper didn't pick up on or didn't really ask any follow-up questions about, because that seems to be his response to having the worst per capita deaths of any state, and worst in the world except for Peru if Mississippi were a state. But what he's saying is, well, last year it started in the south and it's going and then went to the north. So just you wait. Other states are going to have their per capita death rate's going to go up and Mississippi's not going to look so bad, which is kind of a grim argument to make. And I don't know, it's quite possible. Right now it looks like the lower vaccinated Republican states are the ones that are getting hit by the Delta variant. But as I've talked about for all summer, there is this pattern that what Governor Reeves said is actually correct, that in the South, where people stay inside in the summer because it's too hot, that's when coronavirus does well, because that's one of the main things it needs is a whole bunch of people inside. But then when the weather starts changing and people in the North start staying inside because it's too cold, that could be when the pandemic starts spiking in those areas. And it's possible that that's actually going to happen, and I'm actually really worried about that. Hopefully enough people will get vaccinated so that there won't be a population for the virus to spread. Of course, there are the 5 to 12-year-olds who are going to school in a lot of places there was breaking news this morning that Pfizer has submitted data showing that that a 1/3 dosage is effective in kids from 5 to 11, and now the federal agencies will look at that for several weeks. You saw last week a prediction that maybe right around Halloween they would have vaccines for kids, so that they won't be such a fertile population for the pandemic to spread. But unfortunately, I think that what Tate Reeves said there might come to pass. It's kind of a grim counter argument, like, just wait, it's going to get worse in other places. But I guess we'll have to find out if he's correct. But as of right now, Mississippi is the worst of the worst. One other thing, I watched Morning Joe this morning. Joe Scarborough played some of that clip and then spent all this time berating Governor Tate Reeves for calling deaths a lagging indicator, which I did not get at all. I mean, he did say that a lot, but that actually is true, because first you have cases spike, and then a few weeks later people go to the hospital who were in the case spike, and then after they go to the hospital, they can survive usually a few weeks in the ICU, and that's when the deaths start spiking. So the deaths are the last thing to spike, so if cases are going down, eventually deaths will go down. I don't quite understand why Joe Scarborough was... I didn't take that clip, but I don't know why Joe Scarborough spent all that time like yelling about lagging indicators, why death being a lagging indicator. That seems not a valid criticism to me, but you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And now I'm going to move on to the two experts here, and this I wanted to kind of juxtapose these next two clips. First, there's Fox News Sunday's Chris Wallace cross-examining Francis Collins, the head of the National Institutes of Health. So he's Anthony Fauci's boss, and then Anthony Fauci is in the next clip being cross-examined by Martha Raddatz about pretty much the same thing. Why was Biden's plan rejected to give vaccine boosters to everybody starting today? I think, and I've juxtaposed these so that you can see the difference between the biased questioning of Chris Wallace on Fox News, I think, versus the more reasonable way to get information that Martha Raddatz uses in her interview with Anthony Fauci. But anyway, like I said, this is like, and Francis Collins, to his credit, even sort of in a mild way calls out Chris Wallace for the way he's framing his questioning about what happened with vaccine boosters not being approved right now for the general population. And anyway, with all that introduction, I will talk with you a little more about that after we watch this portion of Chris Wallace's interview with Dr. Francis Collins yesterday over here.
Let's start with that FDA advisory panel, which, as we've said, supported the idea of booster shots for people 65 and older, or those most at risk, but rejected the idea of booster shots for the general population. Here's what President Biden said last month.
The plan is for every adult to get a booster shot 8 months after you got your second shot.
Dr. Collins, is the advisory panel right? Do you now agree with them on this limited booster program over what the president was proposing last month, the general population getting boosters, which he said was based on advice from his medical experts, including you?
You know, Chris, I think there's less difference between where we were in the middle of August and what the advisory committee said this past Friday. They did encourage and vote for the administration of boosters to people over 65 and those at high risk of exposure. Those are the people who would be most likely to reach that 8-month period, because that's how we prioritized initial immunizations back in January. So I don't think there's huge differences here. I think the big news is that they actually did approve the initiation of boosters. And remember, they're taking a snapshot of right now. We're going to see what happens in the coming weeks. It would surprise me if it does not become clear over the next few weeks that administration of boosters may need to be enlarged. Based upon the data that we've already seen both in the U.S. and in Israel, it's clear the waning of the effectiveness of those vaccines is a reality, and we need to respond to it. But they looked at where we were on Friday and said, here's where the data is convincing to start now, and we'll see what CDC says later this week.
But just to be clear, what you're saying is you still think, and I understand the people further down the list, younger people, healthier people, didn't get their vaccines as early in the process. You still think that we're going to need a booster program for everyone?
I'm not sure about absolutely everyone. We'll have to see what they say ultimately about the youngest individuals because of concerns about benefits and risks. But I will be surprised if boosters are not recommended for people under 65 going forward in the next few weeks. But we'll wait and see. You know, Chris, what you're seeing here is science playing out in a very transparent way. This is the way it ought to be. I'm a little troubled that people are complaining that the process isn't working for them. The process is to look at the data, have the experts consider it, and then make their best judgment at that point, recognizing that the judgments may change. If people want an absolutely authoritative statement about here's the right answer, well, that's not what our country is all about. Move to China, you'll get it there.
Yeah, but let me ask you about that, Dr. Collins, because President Biden said he announced on August 18th that they were going to start the plan. Yes, he did have a line about, well, we pending approval of the FDA and the CDC, but he talked about starting a booster program on September 20th. That's tomorrow. And he talked about giving it to all people, not just a limited group. Now, back during the campaign, he talked a lot about follow the science. Isn't announcing a specific date and a specific plan for the general population before any of the regulators, the FDA, the CDC, have approved it, isn't that the exact opposite of follow the science?
Well, he was basically responding to a statement made by 8 physician scientists, including me, including the head of the FDA and the head of the CDC, saying we had looked at the data and it looked as if boosters were going to be a good thing for Americans to start to utilize. Recognizing in that speech, he did say CDC and FDA's advisory process has to kick in first. You know, I guess I'm a little troubled, Chris, about all of the buzz that's happening right now about whether the process was perfect. Of course it's not perfect. No process ever is. But have we lost track of the goals? The goals here are to try to protect Americans from dying from this disease. 670,000 have already. It does look, from the review of the data by people like myself, that we are going to need to provide boosters for people at risk in order to keep this surge from beginning to affect even those who are fully vaccinated. We're trying to do the right thing, trying to look at the data as it evolves, recognize things are changing day by day. Maybe we ought to be talking more about that than about whether the president said this a month ago and FDA said this on Friday. Let's try to get the science right and do it transparently and openly so everybody sees what the process looks like.
And then actually Chris Wallace goes on to ask this question about whether we should be giving boosters to Americans when there's more than half of the world population hasn't gotten their first vaccine shot yet, which I can only imagine how Fox News would treat the opposite proposition, or if they thought Biden was giving vaccines to people outside the United States in a way that hurt people in the United States, that if that were like a clear decision from the Biden administration, that they would rake him over the coals on Fox News like every hour for a week at least. They're still not through with the Afghanistan withdrawal, which they cover every single day. And of course, Biden's border crisis. I showed you they actually use this chyron, this lower third text, every single day that says Biden's border crisis. They often go into his spending spree. And anyway, I did think that, as I said before I showed the clip, that Chris Wallace's cross-examination there was biased in terms of some sort of failure on the part of the Biden administration that wasn't really there. I like the way Francis Collins said multiple times how he was troubled by this framing of the process not working when the process is working. Even threw in a move to China there. That was a nice touch. And then Chris Wallace, after Francis Collins spent all this time talking about how science works, how you get more data and data changes especially with a novel coronavirus that's just a couple years old, that we're still learning things, especially about the new variants, and gaining data as to how people have only been vaccinated for about or less than a year at this point. So there's still data about how long it takes for the immunity to wane, and there'll still be more data 3 months from now, and that's just the way how science works. And even after Francis Collins explained all that, Chris Wallace follows up by saying, but isn't changing your mind with new information mean you're not following the science? Like, what? That is, and it really, I think, I see people making non-scientific anti-vax claims in my live comment section. I also have been spending a lot of time recently watching my local government meetings, my local county board of supervisors meeting. They even had this resolution on the agenda last Tuesday to stop misinformation coming from the board of supervisors, because one of our 5 supervisors is actually kind of an anti-vaxxer. And anyway, I don't want to go off into that whole tangent, but I spend a lot of time. There were at least like a dozen public commenters talking about, violation of the Nuremberg laws and how COVID is a hoax and all sorts of ridiculous things. And so that's a real problem. And for Fox News to support the narrative that the Biden administration is somehow anti-science when all they're doing is following the science, when new information is learned, as more data is available, they make decisions based on the information, the greater amount of information that they then have, and that's not anti-science, that is science. So kudos to Francis Collins, and anti-kudos. Now, what do you call it? I'd say I give my criticism to Chris Wallace for supporting that anti-science narrative, where he's being anti-science. Anyway, and as I said before I showed the clip, I want to juxtapose it with Martha Raddatz, I think, doing a better job of eliciting information from Anthony Fauci on the same topic without supporting an anti-science narrative. And you can let me know what you think after we compare that previous Fox News Sunday interview of Francis Collins with this ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos interview of Anthony Fauci. Like I said, same information, but definitely, I think, a different framing. You can let me know what you think after we watch that clip together over here.
Were you disappointed that the panel did not recommend vaccines for all? Did you think that was a mistake?
No, not necessarily at all. We had a plan to be able to do it all, to go down to everyone, but we had said right from the beginning that this would be contingent upon the examination of all of the data that the FDA accumulated that would be discussed with their advisory committee, and that's exactly what happened. So as you well know, the approval was for people 65 years of age or older, and a considerable number of people who are 18 to 64 who have underlying conditions that put them at a higher risk for severe disease, and people from 18 to 64 who are in institutional or occupational situations that would put them at an increased risk to exposure and infection. So that's a pretty good chunk of the people. If the decision was made based on the data that they examined, but that was always the plan, Martha, to make a proposal to be ready and prepared to do the entire amount right from the beginning with everybody, but if not, to be prepared to do what the advisory committee and the FDA finally authorized, which is fine. So I'm not disappointed. I think the process worked.
This seemed to come down to the lack of enough data. Some FDA experts saying that evidence from Pfizer and others was not enough to convince them that this third shot would be that effective in stopping the spread. Is that right?
Well, I mean, it depends on what you mean about stopping the spread and protecting people from getting severe disease and hospitalization. There are two different concepts there. We would hope that ultimately, when we get the proper vaccination to everyone, when we get a more extensive distribution of the boosters, that it will have an effect of stopping the spread. But the goal of this particular decision was to prevent people from getting serious disease who are at risk, such as the elderly, and those who have underlying conditions. So there's a multi-step process in this. Ultimately, Martha, we hope that enough people will be vaccinated either with the primary regimen or following a third shot booster with Pfizer, that we will get that effect of preventing spread.
And Dr. Fauci, you've repeatedly cited the Israeli data showing waning vaccine protection across all age groups as justification for booster shots. Yet the panel revealed that Israel has different definitions of severe illness, which also look to play into the decision.
Well, see, that's the reason why you get the data and you present it to a group of very qualified people to examine it. What's happening, Martha, is that in real time, more and more data are accumulating. So I would tell you, and I could predict with some confidence, that 3-4 weeks from now, as we get more data from the Israelis and more data from our own United States cohorts, that there will be a continual re-examination of that data and potential modification of recommendations. But based on what the committee, the advisory committee, saw in that presentation on Friday, based on that, they made a decision to do what we just said about individuals in certain categories, which is fine. But the story is not over because more and more data is coming in and will be coming in.
And the recommendation is just for the Pfizer vaccine booster. What about Moderna and Johnson & Johnson? How quickly might they have data?
Yeah, good question, Martha, because everybody's asking that, understandably. It is not any more than a couple of weeks away, 2 to 3 weeks or so away. Right now, the data are coming in from both the J&J as well as to Moderna. And, you know, people say, are these individuals being left behind? By no means. Within a few weeks, we'll be examining it in the same manner as we did with the Pfizer data.
You know, you yourself have said how important consistency is, and you mentioned earlier President Biden talked about planning for a September 20th rollout for all Americans. I know he said planning. I know he said it depends on the FDA. But isn't a timeline like that just confusing to people?
I'm not necessarily think that that's the case, Martha, because we wanted to be ready. These are the kinds of things that when you make a decision, you don't snap your finger and it gets rolled out the next day. And that's, I think, the thing that the people in the United States need to understand. The plan was that we have to be ready to do this as soon as a decision is made. And when you have a plan, you put a date on it and you say, we want to be able to get ready to roll out on the week of September the 20th. And as it turns out, when the FDA makes their final determination, and very soon thereafter, this coming week, you're going to see the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices that advises the CDC to perhaps even fine-tune that so it can be implemented expeditiously. So getting that date, I don't think was confusing. We needed a date to be able to say, let's get ready to roll this out pending the decision and the deliberation by the FDA and ultimately the CDC.
So there you go. Actually, Martha Raddatz then goes on to ask about when the availability of vaccines for kids, which Anthony Fauci says just weeks after Pfizer submits the data, and Pfizer submitted the data today, so that means maybe by Halloween there will be emergency use authorization of the Pfizer vaccine for kids age 5 to 11. That would be great news, I know, for a lot of parents who are worried about sending their kids to school during a spike in the pandemic because of the Delta variant when their kids don't have the vaccine. I also, like I said before, I showed that clip comparing it to the Fox News Sunday cross-examination of Francis Collins. I thought that Martha Raddatz did not have the bias towards the bad faith of the Biden administration that Chris Wallace seemed to have, and yet actually got some more information, better information out of Anthony Fauci about how the panel that decided not to approve boosters for the general population did so because they were more concerned with stopping serious disease versus stopping spread of the disease, and that might change. And that's actually something I worry about as a vaccinated person, that I know that being vaccinated really lowers my risk of being hospitalized or dying from COVID, but I don't want to get sick for several days. And that's one of the things that they're not really talking about in terms of the current level of vaccine, especially in the waning days. How much is it protecting people just from getting sick? Because that's something I'd like for my vaccine, is to not get sick, especially especially if everybody has the ability to get a vaccine. So I don't feel that there's a problem with getting a booster. But I also thought Martha Raddatz's question about Israel having a different definition of severe illness was well informed, and got some elicited good information out of Dr. Fauci. And it's not like Martha Raddatz didn't ask any questions about the difference between what Biden promised in terms of a rollout of vaccine boosters today and then what actually happened. But instead of saying that Biden wasn't following the science, instead asked if that timeline was confusing, which, it's a valid question about, public messaging. And I think Anthony Fauci's response was also pretty reasonable about how, they had to plan to give out all these boosters starting today, and you can't just do that starting today. You have to plan for quite a while, and there are quite a few people, especially the at-risk workers, which can be like healthcare workers and teachers and anyone, maybe those essential workers, anyone who might be exposed to COVID. So there are, as Anthony Fauci was saying, there are actually a lot of people for whom boosters were approved, and it might expand in the next several weeks or months. So we'll see how that goes. But anyway, that's the end of the boosters blocked part of my boosters and bipartisanship blocked topic title. The last two clips are on the bipartisanship blocked topic. These are two senators, Republican Bill Cassidy being interviewed by Chuck Todd on NBC News' Meet the Press, and then Senator Bernie Sanders on CBS News' Face the Nation. Chuck Todd is asking Bill Cassidy about, first he talked, like I said, there was this pre-recorded package about about how Trumpism has taken over the Republican Party, and there was a Republican member of the House of Representatives who decided not to run for re-election because he's one of the 11, I think, House members who voted to impeach Donald Trump for the second impeachment for the insurrection, and he decided he couldn't run and win. I can't remember his name, but anyway, there were stories about that on a couple of the Sunday shows, and Bill Cassidy talked about that with Chuck Todd. But I started the clip where he started talking about raising the debt ceiling, which used to be something that was bipartisan. I mean, except when there were crazy, the Freedom Caucus or whatever, Republicans used to play around with the debt ceiling. But the debt, as Chuck Todd I think explains here, the debt ceiling is this weird thing that the United States does, even though Congress authorizes all this spending, and when we have to borrow money to pay for that spending, that requires a separate vote. It's like you already charged it to the credit card, and now you have to vote that you're going to pay the bill, which is kind of ridiculous, and I'll talk about that a little more after. And there's one question, there's one of Bill Cassidy's explanations or justifications that I think Chuck Todd lets him get away with without any cross-examination. So I will be criticizing Chuck Todd after we watch this clip of him talking to Bill Cassidy about Trumpism, or the end of talking about Trumpism, then the debt ceiling and bipartisanship, and Mitch McConnell's almost arsonistic stance, I guess, according to the way he analogizes it, which, anyway, I'll talk about it more after we watch that penultimate newsmaker clip together over here.
Part of the reason why we might have Donald Trump is this idea that Washington is just always finger pointing. And this debt ceiling discussion feels like one of those moments. I want to put up something that Mitch McConnell said. He said, the country must never default. The debt ceiling will need to be raised. The only issue is whose responsibility is it to do it? A Democratic president, a Democratic House, and a Democratic Senate. It's their obligation. This feels like someone saying, there's a fire. I have a fire extinguisher, but I'm not going to use it. And I know where you are on the debt ceiling in general, but do you see how silly this looks to the average person right now, where it's like, just do your job. We know you have to raise the debt ceiling to make sure the economy doesn't crash. Why politicize it?
Yeah, a couple things about that. Every now and then context is important. Debt ceiling context is important. We actually raised on a bipartisan basis the debt ceiling in the last Congress because on a bipartisan basis we agreed on what to spend the money on. This time, Democrats want to increase the debt ceiling on for their reconciliation bill, which they're passing on a party line basis, which is going to fuel inflation if you speak to Democratic economists like Larry Summers. So wait a second. We're supposed to aid and abet party line spending, which even Democratic economists say will fuel further inflation. No, that's not right. Now, if you want to come back and meet where we can actually find common ground, where we can actually address needs as opposed to a Democratic wish list, well, then we'll help. But not when you're just trying to tank the economy by fueling inflation to get your
But Senator, the debt ceiling, this debt ceiling has nothing to do with the reconciliation. This isn't about spending going forward. This is about spending that's already happened. I mean, I understand the messaging. No. I understand the messaging you want to make clear here and the issue of spending, and I understand that from an ideological disagreement. That's politics. But that is not what this debt ceiling is about right now. It's simply paying the bills we've already promised we'd pay.
We'd actually raised the debt ceiling adequately to address all the way up to the $1.9 trillion package that was passed the American Relief Plan on a party line vote, which has money out there far in excess of what is actually needed and is contributing to the inflation we have now. And I would beg to differ with you. Going forward, that's what they're hoping to do. They're hoping to increase the debt ceiling to meet their $3.5 trillion package, which the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget says is actually $5.5 trillion. And so we're going to disagree on this. They are increasing the debt ceiling to make room for a $5.5 trillion Democratic Party wish list.
Well, I think that isn't how this technical debt ceiling needs to be. Very quickly, there's still people without power in your state.
And then Chuck Todd goes on to ask Senator Cassidy about the bipartisan infrastructure deal and whether it will help people not lose power when hurricanes hit Louisiana, since he's the senator from Louisiana. But the one thing I thought Chuck Todd let Senator Cassidy get away with there was he made this explanation, the Democrats joined us raising the debt ceiling previously because they agreed with the spending that we all voted for that required raising the debt ceiling. And Chuck Todd's only response to that was, but this debt ceiling, raising the debt ceiling is still for spending that's already happened. What he missed there is, Democrats raised the debt ceiling for spending they agreed on, but it also, one of the reasons the debt ceiling had to be raised before was because of that tax plan that cut taxes for the corporations and the rich, cost a lot of revenue, didn't pay for itself like they claimed. That's one of the reasons they had to raise the debt ceiling. And Democrats, in a bipartisan way, because you can't let the U.S. government default on its debt. That is just bad for everybody. It's it's even stupid that this is something that is built into the law and has to be done. I think the debt ceiling should be done away with. If, the spending has been authorized, you have to be able to borrow to cover it when the revenue doesn't cover it. But my point is, one of the reasons the revenue doesn't cover it or covers it less is because of that huge Republican tax cut for corporations and the rich. Chuck Todd did not cross-examine Bill Cassidy about that point at all, which I thought was an error. But so there, I've criticized Chuck Todd for the Chuck Todd haters out there. And for the Bernie Sanders fans out there, for those who watched my Sunday live clip roundup for many years, that I voted for Bernie Sanders in the primary in 2016 and 2020, but ended up voting for Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden in the general election. So does that make me a Bernie Sanders fan? I guess I kind of am. And here is Bernie Sanders talking about, first he talked about how they were trying to get... He talked about how drone strikes are bad, and even though the Biden administration is doing them, so sticking to his principles. That's before this clip. Also about deporting people looking for asylum, the Haitians who are down in Texas looking for asylum. He was principled and criticized the Biden administration for that. And then he talked about trying to get immigration reform in a path to citizenship into the Democrat-only reconciliation bill that only requires Democrats, the votes from Democratic senators, so they can pass it with 50 votes. Breaking news since this clip, the parliamentarian in the Senate said that can't be done, so they're not going to be able to solve that problem. I didn't take that part of the clip. This is the part of the clip where he starts talking about the negotiations on the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill that, like I said, only Democratic senators are supposed to vote for, but there are a couple, like Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona and Joe Manchin of West Virginia, who say $3.5 trillion is too much. And here you see Bernie Sanders make the point that $3.5 trillion was already a negotiated compromise, and why he thinks that they're still going to be able to get it done. This is the partisan deal, not the bipartisan deal. But anyway, I think I've introduced this clip enough. It's the final Newsmaker clip before the bonus Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip for the fans of my dog Sandy and my cat Dash and their interactions. I'll have that after the news clip. But first, let's listen to Bernie Sanders explain what's going on with the trillions of dollars they're trying to spend on infrastructure and human infrastructure, and whether that's going to work or not is going to be decided sometime in the next few weeks, maybe even in the next week. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
I understand it's monumental, and it's a struggle within your own party, to be frank, because Senator Manchin just met this week with President Biden. He continues to say the number you're asking for is too big, it's too much. Will you meet with the president this week, and do you plan to give anything here to get closer to the numbers that the moderates in your own party say need to be met?
Well, let me tell you this. We have started off, as you know, with I would guess 80% of the Democratic caucus supporting a $6 trillion bill. Remember, this is over 10 years. Per year, it's less than we spend on the military. Now, maybe you can tell me, or somebody else can tell me, how much we should spend to save the planet. Because what the scientists are telling us is that if we don't get a handle on climate change within the next few years, there will be irreparable damage. And you know what? I got 4 kids and 7 grandchildren. And I think we have a moral responsibility to leave them a planet that is healthy and is habitable.
Are you
so
sure
we are
that
working
President...
right now. We got 50 votes. We're going to have to work it out as we did with the American Rescue Plan. But I have already made, and my colleagues have made, a major compromise going from $6 trillion down to $3.5 trillion.
So am I hearing you correctly when you say you are not willing to move on that $3.5 trillion number, even if the president asks you to do it? I mean, are you risking losing everything?
Look, right now what we are doing is we are engaging with the House and the Senate. It is a complicated proposal. All I am telling you is that $3.5 trillion is much too low. A compromise has already been made, an agreement has been made. And the American people, by the way, poll after poll after poll, are telling us now is the time to stand up to powerful special interests. Now is the time to start representing working families on all of these issues. They are enormously powerful. And maybe, just maybe, we can work for workers for a change and not just wealthy campaign contributors.
You keep saying the number of 50 votes, but it is well reported that Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema are not with you on this within the Democratic Party. Are you certain that President Biden will get them all in line?
We went through this with the American Rescue Plan. We dealt with this with the American Rescue Plan, which, as you know, is the most significant piece of legislation to take us out of the economic decline. And it cut childhood poverty by 50%. It provided unemployment benefits. It did what had to be done to get us out of the emergency. We came together, and I expect, because of the pressure of the American people, we're going to come together again and do what has to be done.
Will you meet with President Biden this week, just like Senator Manchin did last?
I'm happy to meet with the president anytime. But at the end of the day, I think what the overwhelming majority of the American people want us to do is finally stand up for them, not just the drug companies and the healthcare industry and the fossil fuel industry. This is what we are trying to do. It's an enormous fight. We're going to win it.
It's an enormous fight, and we will track it. Thank you very much, Senator Sanders.
I think Bernie's great. You hear a lot of the same rhetoric that you've heard for if you voted for him in 2016 and 2020 like I did. You've heard a lot of that before, but it's still it's a good spiel. It's a good patter there, and it's something Bernie's been fighting. You know, I was talking about how, by the way, if you want to see the entire interview with Bernie Sanders, there's a link down in the video description. I have first media mention, that's the summary of all the clips, and then under that there's sources, which is the source of all the clips, including a link to CBS News Face the Nation, which actually goes to their YouTube channel, where they have all the entire program split into clips, including the entire 7-something minute Bernie Sanders interview, where he sticks to his principles on drone strikes and deportations, like I said in the part before the clip I showed. But I think he's definitely I would say one of the most principled Democrats, but of course he's such a principled Democrat, he's not even a Democrat, right? He's an independent. But sometimes I wonder what it would have been like if he had been elected president, although I think he also makes an awesome chairman of the House Budget Committee, which is the role he's fulfilling really well in that clip. I believe you can let me know what you think down in the comment section, and that is actually the last of the Newsmaker clips, like I said, and so I'm going to finish up with a Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip as promised. This is a clip I took yesterday just to show you, sometimes I show how they get along. This is where I think sometimes Dash the cat needs a little bit of distance, but also how they share the communal water bowl. Anyway, I don't want to pre-criticize the Dash and Sandy clip, I guess. I'll just show it to you and then say goodbye for the week. over here. I don't know why Dash loves the dog water bowl so much, but that's just what you expect from the cat cat-dog interactions. I mean, I've shown it many times. You can let me know what you think about the Dash and Sandy clip, what you think about the other 11 clips I picked out for you, my commentary and criticism. I will be back, I think, for the rest of 2021 at least, doing these Monday media mix-ups. I'm constantly reevaluating it. I want to see maybe viewership will pick up in the fall. It usually does. People tend to like the Saturday Night Live clips for the political comedy clip, and premiere of Saturday Night Live is October 2nd, so we'll see what happens then. And anyway, maybe I'll have some reason to upload some other clip, although I'm actually really busy with some ACLU stuff this week. In fact, I have a meeting that I'm supposed to go to in like 42 minutes, so I should probably sign off and get going. But like I said, thanks for showing up for the live show or for leaving a comment from the recorded show. Give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. See you all next Monday at noon or near thereabouts. Until then, I guess I will see all of you around the internet.